Geek Kon 2016 has wrapped up, and this is my second year going, and last year I was pretty open about how disappointing it was and was hoping that this year they would make some improvements. Have they taken the hint and made any improvements, or has the convention continued its mediocrity? So I'd like to start this review off by starting at the areas that I think were not the most impactful, but are still important to note. And these two areas kind of mostly being the game room and the rave. I feel like both of these areas / events weren't necessarily bad and were decently well done, but had things about them that kind of just like threw off what I think was good about them, and then in turn kind of just made them this meh experience overall. Now first, the game room. I thought it was actually better than it was last year. They had more arcade cabinets working, and it seemed like they didn't lose a case of games like they did last year. So I felt like really there was a lot of that could improve from last year, because last year really sucked. Now going into this year though, there was again a lot more kind of brought up, but in terms of the cabinets, but in terms of the actual consoles themselves, there really felt like there was a lot of empty space. Now, I'm not expecting a crap ton for a small convention to have in its game room, but for one that used to tout that it was the biggest game room in the state of Wisconsin for conventions, it was severely disappointing. However, the improvements, again, that were made are going to be met by something that kind of takes them down. And the biggest one for me is the fact that they were seemingly closing down aspects of the game room way earlier than they should have been. When we went into the game room on Sunday around noonish, and they were already starting to pack up parts of the LAN room. I was even considering asking Nick if he wanted to play something in the LAN room with me, just because I felt like, well, we're here, there's some nice keyboards, let's give it a shot. But most of them that weren't taken were getting taken down by the staff, and it's like this convention has like 3 to 4 hours left. Like, what are you doing? It feels like they were kind of giving up on the section early, and they were doing that to multiple areas of the game room even that early in the morning. And at 1 o'clock they were even taking down a number of the consoles, and they really weren't completely, I guess, fixing some of the cabinets. Like DDR seemingly was working in an area, but they kind of just refused to let people use it because one of the sections were broken. So it kind of, to me, was something that I feel like they were just kind of giving up on. And if you're giving up on any part of your convention well before it closes, that's a severely damning sign about how the convention is going and how it will take place in the future. Now, the rave was pretty good. I wouldn't say it was the worst than Anime Milwaukee's from this year, because I think the music was actually pretty decent, and the DJs seemed to be doing pretty well. But the issue was, it felt like, in a number of things that this convention had, there was a lack of change. This is actually an issue for a number of things in this convention. And there was a severe lack of hype for each of these DJs. What I mean by that is, when we were at Midwest, it felt like there was always somebody up on stage with the DJs trying to pump up the crowd, like trying to get everybody moving, dancing. Like, he did a great job, and like everybody was always like dancing and having fun. Geek Kon, it didn't seem like that. It really seemed like there was a lot of just standing around and there was like one dance circle, but it didn't seem super active. And the DJs weren't ever saying anything. No one was ever saying anything, I guess. Like, I wouldn't necessarily expect the DJ themselves to like say a lot, but I expect somebody to try to be humping up the crowd here. Now, I would say both the game room and the rave were overall positives for the convention. The issue is, though, that they were marred by factors that I think the whole convention is suffering as a whole, that really are going to take them down continually every year until something different is made. So there are 3 areas that I really look at as being where Geek Kon has to focus their priority attention in order to be able to continue as a con, because they're definitely where they have slumped the most in recent time. So the first area I want to talk about is guests. Similarly to Anime Midwest, Geek Kon did not have a great guest lineup. However, I would say that compared to the Anime Midwest lineup, Geek Kon's was even worse. This is nothing against the guests who did go to Geek Kon. All the guests that were there are great people, but I would not say a significant number of them are really anything to write home about. I mean, the guests that were there have done amazing work, but at the same time, like, a convention generally does need some kind of high profile, guest to just bring in a number of people. And they don't have that. And sure, they're a small convention, so I can see where people would argue that maybe because they are smaller, it's harder for them to get that. But at the same time, eventually you cast enough lines, you're going to catch a fish. And the biggest factor to me about Geek Kon and their guests, or their lack thereof, is the fact that, Geek Kon is a very, open-ended convention. It's it's for gaming, comic books, anime. It reaches a broad spectrum that maybe something like Anime Midwest doesn't hit as well. It's trying to cater to pretty much all things geek, and therefore can get guests that fit all aspects of it. They don't just have to get anime guests, they don't just have to get comic book guests. They can get a wide amount, and therefore if they're not getting anybody who is of real worthy note, things that are people like a Todd Habercorn or Vic Mignogna. I mean, sure, that's anime, but still, I don't know a ton for comic books. But if they don't get a big comic book author or artist, or they don't get a big movie, whatever, they're not getting anyone. And they have such this wide brush that they should be able to eventually be able to make a mark on a canvas. The second thing I want to touch is panels. If you take a look at the panels that they had available, which I actually will link in the description, at least for as long as it's available, it is pretty barren. If you take a look at the panelists, which I'll leave a link to in the description for at least as long as it's available, there really isn't a lot. You can look at the list and it seems like, oh, there's a lot of things. But if you look at what's color coded for just panels and not viewing shit and whatever, there is not a lot. There is not a lot of people putting panels in this convention. And my guess is that people don't feel the need to. I mean, there was so little to do with this convention. I tried my best to do what I could for videos and stuff, but not everyone has that. So, I mean, I saw so many people just chilling in the hallway. I had a friend of mine who noted that he was like, what do we do at this convention? There's not much going on. And it's because there's no conventions to go to, and they're not all interesting. And it's just a toss-up about what on earth you can figure out what to do. I mean, for the most part, when I wasn't doing video, I was just chilling with my friends, which sure is interesting, but I don't have to, they shouldn't have to pay to do that. We can do that at any time. But sure, I got a press badge, so I didn't have to pay for the convention, but other people did. So people had to waste their money on just sitting in the hotel lobby and doing almost nothing, which is a huge issue because you're going to continue to get people to not show up to your convention as a result of this. Which, speaking of people spending their money, it's kind of going to lead me right into my final point, which is part of the location. For those of you who don't know, Geek Kon takes place in Middleton, Wisconsin, which is a decently sized town or city. It's got a good number of people, but it's because it's right off of Madison, which is the state capital, which is kind of what Geek Kon I guess advertises itself as is the Madison Convention. The problem is you don't get to tout yourself as the Madison Convention if you're not in Madison. And who the hell outside of Wisconsin knows what Middleton is? And I guess very few. Now, if you look at it on paper, the hotel that this convention takes place on is actually right off a freeway, and because it's kind of close to Madison, you think oh, well, some people are going to know it eventually. There's one big problem with this. The issue is you can't tell that a convention is going on from the freeway, and if you're in Middleton, based on where this hotel is even placed, you would never know that there's a convention going on in Middleton based on where it is, because it's so separated and there's not a whole lot of things around this hotel district. So maybe some people in restaurants will wonder, why am I seeing someone in this McDonald's with a wig on and they're dressed weird? But at the same time, that's a very small amount of people. And so partly the counter argument might be well, if they were to go to Madison, then it would be way more expensive, and if they're already getting less people, then they could just completely lose everything. But that's kind of my point, is that if they don't do something, especially about this location, which is no one's gonna see it just from the street, it's gonna die anyway. Who this convention is for, I mean, if I had to put some kind of name onto it, I would say that this convention is probably best for the general first convention goer. I know I've mentioned before that Anime Milwaukee is a really good first convention, but because this one is kind of just so small and, you know, well-rounded in terms of its topics, I think it kind of gets a benefit for any type of first-time con goer. There's not a ton of people to get someone overwhelmed about the sheer population, and maybe for somebody who's not so into anime, they don't just walk into this convention and see, like, you know, body pillows and nudist beach cosplayers everywhere. You know, like, it's very much, you know, a well, I guess, volumed amount of, you know, content or, you know, cosplay and whatever. However, the issue is not everybody's a first-time con goer forever, and eventually everybody's going to realize that, you know, sure, they've had their first convention now, but when they go to any other convention, they're going to realize how much better it is because there's a significantly larger amount of things to do. So then finally, would I recommend this convention? No, I would not. And I'd love to try to give it some way for me to, like, make it better, but they have to make a lot of changes for me to really want to go again. And I honestly would not recommend anybody spend the money to go there for a whole weekend. I mean, sure, if you go there for maybe one day, especially if you want to take someone to a convention for the first time and you don't want to overwhelm them, then sure, the one day maybe isn't that bad, because then you don't have to worry about a hotel and all the other stuff that's involved in going all 3 days. But even then, I can't say it's worth doing, because sure, you may even go for a day, but there's just nothing to do. Like, they need to, like, come up with a game plan of how they're going to be able just to hype up this convention more, and not only that, but just get more things to do. Like, I think they need to follow the example of other conventions, and they're just gonna have to take risks. And if they don't do that, this convention is not going to exist in a matter of maybe a couple years or so. I think my biggest takeaway from this weekend was they were kind of building this, like, cardboard city for, like, a charity thing. And one of the staff members that was helping build it, they had made, like, this Fallout shelter kind of thing from the game. And, like, on it, it had, like, one of the big intro lines from the game, except it said, Geek Kon never changes. And it's funny because I feel like the staff member wrote this to be like, oh, I'm really glad that Geek Kon has always been the same because I know what I'm expecting. However, the ironic part about it is that that very mentality is what could possibly kill this convention. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you can see me more in the other conventions I go to. Next up is YumaCon. I'm so excited, and hopefully it's a little bit better of an experience maybe than this one. Otherwise, I will see you guys in the next video later.